You hear a lot about culture, but what exactly is the Pelicans' culture, and do they have one that's conducive to winning? If they don't, what are they missing? It's a Monday episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available right here on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. Here with y'all on this Monday, kicking off a week's worth of shows. We're going to get a little spicy this week on Locked On Pelicans. I'll tell you in a little bit what's coming later in the week here. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. No one else comes to you like this Monday through Friday, talking about the topics you want to hear. Yes, even in the off season, we're still going to be 5 days a week for like the next 2-3 months. So we'll be covering the draft, free agency, everything you want to know about this team, including maybe a live show or two. And to my everydayers, the people who do listen Monday through Friday, thank you all. You're the reason we're here, and it's a lot of fun doing this show. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans brought to you by PrizePicks. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That's PrizePicks.com, promo code Locked On. Let's get into the culture talk. I'm excited for this one today, as it might inform some of the shows later in the week. So what is culture? What is culture when it comes to a sports team or any organization? You hear this word thrown about a lot. Everyone wants to have a good culture. The team's losing. Do they have a bad culture? If they're winning, do they have a good culture? Maybe, maybe not. You know, culture, I do think, is more than simply liking everybody. This Pelicans team, this Pelicans locker room is connected. They are close for the most part. Everyone likes each other on this team. They get along really well. You've heard people like Jennifer Hale talking about how close they are in the locker room. You've heard it from the coaches, from the players, front office too, about what the locker room is like, that they all like each other. They're all rooting for each other. They all get along. They can have some conversations. They hang out. All of that's great. But a culture, especially when it comes to a sports franchise, I do think is more than that. And there's a couple of examples in the NBA you can look at, the most famous one probably being the Miami Heat. Heat culture is very much a thing. And Udonis Haslem, who's played 20 years there, which is insane to me, talks a lot about it. And you can go look up various interviews with him that are really insightful. But he defines the Miami Heat culture as discipline, accountability, work ethic, and enjoying somebody else's success. Those are the four things. When you look at this Pelicans team, I think they have the makings of something really good, particularly that last part, and even work ethic somewhat. This is a team that has guys that have grown. There's been a lot of development and guys stepping up. They had 10 players, I think, score 20 or more points in a game this season. Guys were ready when their number was called a lot of the time, and they were like rearing and ready to go. It wasn't just like, oh, now you're in there and they don't know what to do. A lot of these guys were ready. Even a guy like Jackson Hayes, who doesn't play a lot, had some not great minutes, but also some very solid minutes when he was called into duty late in the season. So developing guys, growth of players, right? Show up, play hard in practice, show up, watch film, show up, work hard. You're going to get out there on the court and be ready when your number is called. And Willie Green has kind of said this, right? He said, I trust every one of these guys on this team to step in and play. We'll get into that a little bit more in the next segment when we talk more about accountability, which is where I do think the Pelicans are lacking. But there is, as I said, the makings of something good. When I remember talking to a scout a number of years ago and people with a team and saying like, why do you need to get on the road? Can't you just kind of watch the film and break that down? And they have people that do that. But like scouts often sit right behind an opposing team's bench to try and get like play calls and get their kind of like vocabulary that they use, but also to kind of really read the player's body language and understand kind of what they're doing. Who do they like with each other? What do they like with each other? Who's rooting for who? And you can always see this on the sideline. And I found that very insightful. And it's something you don't get just watching the game on TV and being in the arena to try and see. When a player scores, are his teammates all standing up and cheering for him? Do they go nuts? Or are they just kind of sitting down almost like golf clapping? Are certain players up and rooting for other guys all the time, and some just not really that invested in it and are just kind of there, blah, on the bench? Those type of things kind of indicate either something about the player or something about the team's culture. The Pelicans are up. They are bouncing. They are having fun. They are losing their mind. Jose Alvarado is like the poster child for this sort of thing. He's having the most fun on the bench when anyone does anything. And that's the type of guy you want to have in a locker room that can build a culture, I think, about all of that. That's really good. And Jose Alvarado has even said, Willie Green is the best coach he's ever had. Willie Green changed his life. And I think a number of players, no one's going to say anything bad about Willie Green. They kind of really bought into his message. They really like him as a coach, and he is able to get through to them, I think. I go back to the story of him going over to Devontae Graham's home when he got sent to the bench last year, I think it was, and spent an hour talking with him to get his buy-in and secure that. Having a coach that does that gets that buy-in from your players for roles and various things, I think does say there's the makings of a good culture there. But I wouldn't say that the Pelicans have this impeccable culture, that they have a way they go about doing things that, if you remove some of these pieces, it will remain and it wouldn't just fall apart. Discipline, accountability, work ethic, enjoying somebody else's success. Look, Trey Murphy has worked and he's grown as a player. Larry Nance Jr. playing through injury. Same thing for CJ McCollum, even more so, right? The work ethic's there. They all are rooting for others to succeed, and they love that. You have two of those, I think. It's the other two that I think could still be what they're working on. And discipline's also kind of a weirder one. Let's get into those two a little bit coming up here. More accountability in the next segment. And this is where I think the Pelicans maybe are lacking a little bit. But I say that with an asterisk. And I'll explain why coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Before we do that, though, today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. And it's super simple. You pick 2 to 6 players, and if they go score more or less than their PrizePicks projection, you can win up to 25 times your money on any entry. It's that simple. You want to take Kevin Durant to score more than 25.5 points? You can do it. To score less than 25.5 points, you can do it. And the best part is you're not competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections. You see a number, more than that or less than that. And they offer projections on any sport you watch, including the NBA playoffs. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less, and they also offer safe and fast withdrawals, and they're currently operational in over 30 states in Canada. So download the PrizePicks app or go to PrizePicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code LOCKEDON. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, they will give you $50. Don't forget, enter promo code LOCKEDON at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. And today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is also brought to you by Nissan. Nissan's most electric player of the week, brought to you by the all-new, all-electric 2023 Nissan Ariya. Let's just straight up give this one to Victor Wembanyama. He is the Nissan's most electric player of the week, causing teams to tank, causing a lot of Pelicans fans to be kind of happy there in the lottery to have a chance at him. This brilliantly fierce player just gets downhill and throws down dunks off his own three-point misses with his size. There's power there. There's an elegance in the footwork that he has. Exactly like the 2023 Nissan Ariya. Packs pin-to-your-seat power and premium intelligence all in one EV. The all-new, all-electric 2023 Nissan Ariya, the EV for people who love to drive. Shop now at nissanusa.com. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday for y'all, breaking down everything you want to know about this team. No one else is still doing it like this in the offseason. We're here Monday through Friday. You're tuning in. You're all wanting to hear about the Pelicans, and I love it. So for my everydayers tomorrow, should the team entertain the thought of trading Brandon Ingram? And then Wednesday, we'll look at should they entertain the thought of trading Zion Williamson. The pros, the cons, kind of my take on it, which you probably already know, but I think it's an interesting discussion to be had. So that's coming up here later in the week on Locked On Pelicans. Today, we're talking about culture. Udonis Haslem describes Heat culture as discipline, accountability, work ethic, and enjoying somebody else's success. I think the Pelicans have a lot of that there, even if it's not perfect, but it's a good start. Accountability is one that I find interesting because that's an area where I do think the team is lacking a little bit. And in the next segment, the one after this, I want to kind of get into how they get some of that and how you emulate some of what the Miami Heat and what some of these other teams have. This is where I think we've seen some trouble. There has been kind of attempts to hold players accountable for the things they do, right? Zion Williamson. This is a big challenge. The star player makes a ton of money. Clearly, there needs to be a little bit more accountability there when it comes to the in-season work that he's doing. I think he's good in the offseason, but the in-season work and the will to be the best player that he can be, and this ties into discipline too. And this is a challenge. You know, there's a weight clause in his contract. That weight clause I do find pointless, but it's there. And I don't think they particularly love that it's there. But that's not clearly holding him accountable, as we've now kind of gotten a sense that he wasn't doing the rehab properly that he should have been doing for whatever reason, whether it's his choice or others. Wasn't happening. So how do you hold him accountable for that? Is it simply you don't get to play in the play-in tournament? You wouldn't have gotten to play in the first round of the playoffs? I think that stuff kind of being put out there, being leaked, really did try and send that message to him. Time will tell if that works. But what about a guy like Brandon Ingram? And it seemed like he, in theory, and it's not my body, it's his body, and I've spoken a lot about this, could have come back from that toe injury sooner instead of missing 29 games. Was there accountability there if that's what he should have been doing? And I think they're lacking some of that. And maybe that's just because these are the top guys kind of on the team. Can you really tell them those sorts of things? You know, when this team was struggling and you saw some hero ball from guys and you saw some lackluster play from others, you know, are they able to have tough conversations in the locker room? Yes, they are close, they're connected, but do they feel like they can actually have those conversations? And I'll be honest, I don't have an answer for you, yes or no, on that. There's a lot that goes on in the locker room behind the scenes that won't get talked about or is off the record, and that, frankly, we don't get to see. It's just kind of how it goes. You know, we've heard of some of the conversations that they've had, or that they were having conversations. We weren't told what those were. Those conversations also didn't work, as they lost the next couple of games after having some of those conversations about what was going on with the team, whether it was a players-only meeting or players and coaches, whatever it was. Are they having the type of conversations they really need to? Are people not being called out in the way that they need to be, but doing it from a place of love? Udonis Haslem talks a lot about this, and he does it by leading by example. Keep that in mind because I want to get into that in the next segment too. You know, he'll call guys out of shape and other things. And he says, because I come in and I'm 223 and I'm at 6% body fat. So if you need to be in shape and you're not, and I'm going to tell you you need to be, I need to be in shape too. And so having that voice, I think, could be important. And I don't know if the Pelicans really do. But also to the coaching staff, right? We saw a lot of the same mistakes repeated over and over by them. Trey Murphy not having plays really designed for him, not being a focal point of the offense. We saw him dropped from the starting lineup after the All-Star break, where the Pelicans proceeded to go 0 for 3 before they reversed that decision. Where's the accountability there for head coach Willie Green? How is he held accountable? And you hear this a lot. It's funny. I was watching the Love is Blind reunion, and they use that word accountability so much, and I'm not sure anyone knows what it actually means, and it's probably important we kind of define it here. I love that show. It is so ridiculous and so great. I have a lot of thoughts, but I'm going to spare you here on Locked On Pelicans. You know, in that reunion episode, they're like, I take accountability for that. The heck does that mean? That just means you're owning up to it, that you screwed up and you said you screwed up. Okay, so what? That doesn't do a whole lot of good, right? When you're holding yourself accountable, it's admitting that you messed up and owning the responsibility around that. But you have to do more than just that, right? You have to change and grow and not make the same mistakes again and improve and try and make amends for the mistakes that you've already made, which is why it's kind of pointless when you see it on a reality show like that. The players need to be doing that, right? I haven't been giving my best on defense. I'm going to make sure that I'm putting in extra time. I'm putting in extra film. Are those type of things happening? Is that happening with the coaches too? We're struggling to design a good offense. The team isn't scoring points. That's on me, the head coach. Okay, what do you do differently and how do you change and evolve from that? And who holds you kind of to task for that? Be David Griffin in a sense. Now, it's not like you're going to threaten to fire Willie Green. These are the challenges that an organization faces, I think, when it comes to stuff with accountability. Can you go to Willie Green and say, we got to change some things here? Can you bring in an outside voice, whether it's a Mike D'Antoni or someone else? That's where this gets kind of tough for both the players and the coaches, and even the front office too. Their accountability is they'll get fired and the team doesn't win games, right? And certainly they know they need to add more shooting and other things too. So go and do it. It's one thing to acknowledge where your flaws are and take accountability for that by saying, it's on me, I didn't make the trade. I didn't coach these guys up. Hey, I missed the shot, so I need to get better. A guy like Herb Jones looks like he's holding himself accountable. His offense wasn't good to begin the year, and you can clearly see the work that he was putting in. His form got a little bit better as the season went on, and the three-point shot started falling more, and that percentage went up. You need that up and down the organization, and it feels like they're missing a little bit of that now because a lot of the same mistakes keep getting repeated. Trey Murphy makes a mistake and gets pulled. Okay, that's in a sense accountability, but other guys make a mistake and don't get pulled. And I think there should be different expectations for different players based on the number of years, their roles, things like that. But you look at it and you go, I'm trying to understand it and I don't. So is there the right kind of accountability, or is there only accountability for certain people? Is there accountability for Zion? Is there accountability for Brandon Ingram? Or are they just superstars and kind of away from all of that? Because they shouldn't be. And that's where this gets a little bit tougher. Same for CJ, right? Who did not play to end the season particularly great. Although overall, when you look at his numbers, they were very good. That's where this gets tough. And this is where when you're kind of looking at this, it feels like they're missing that accountability and a little bit of discipline too. Right? Some of the sloppiness, inbounding, the rebounds off free throws, those are things to drill down and work through and make sure you're not getting that. And that's a discipline thing. Taking care of your body in season is a discipline thing. That's where this team's lacking in an area they definitely need to improve on. So, how do the Pelicans emulate some of that? How do they add that to this team? And that's where this gets a little bit interesting. And let me know where you think the biggest issues with the Pelicans culture could be, or what you think their kind of culture looks like and is. That's my thoughts are coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Before we do that, though, today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by the Ultimate Basketball GM. It's the coolest game I've played in a long time. You get to be an NBA GM and you run your franchise. It's harder than you think. You get to manage every strategic aspect of a franchise, playing through seasons and leading your franchise and fans to glory as you build a historic dynasty. You're responsible for dealing with challenging personalities, players and coaches, hiring the right coaches and assistant coaches, trading and training players, making draft picks, building up your infrastructure, your training facility, your arena, all of those things in a challenging and realistic game world. The Ultimate Pro Basketball GM is completely free, playable offline, which is fantastic. We're all in a league. I make the playoffs every year and get bounced out in the first round. I'm like the Portland Trailblazers or something like that. It's terrible. We're going to break through one day. But it's a lot of fun, and I'm very addicted to this. So Locked On Pelicans listeners get a 100% free boost to your franchise when using the promo code Locked On in the game store. It's all caps. A lot of you asked me about that. So make sure to check it out. To download the game, just visit probasketballgm.com, scan the code here, or look it up on the app stores. That's probasketballgm.com, Ultimate Basketball GM. Start your dynasty today. Use promo code Locked On in all caps. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday for y'all. You know we're here. Breaking down everything you want to know about the team completely free. If you want to support the channel, comment down below on YouTube and become an everydayer. Listen Monday through Friday. Tomorrow, should they trade Brandon Ingram? Wednesday, should they trade Zion Williamson? What would that even look like? What would they be trying to accomplish if doing that? And that's where I think things get a little bit interesting, and I'm excited to have these conversations with y'all. Today, though, we are talking about culture for the Pelicans. What do they have? What should it look like? What do you want it to be? I think they're lacking in certain areas. And I'm not saying that this is easy or an easy fix. at all. Building a franchise, setting the tone, all of that is hard, very hard. The Heat culture has been built up over years. Same for a team like the San Antonio Spurs. But really, when you look at it, when you look at some of the things here, there's one thing that I noticed. When you look at teams that you would think of with good culture, the Spurs being one of them, the Miami Heat, even the Oklahoma City Thunder, I think, have a good one too. Those teams have kind of a constant there. In the Miami Heat, there's a number of them. It's Udonis Haslem, right, on the player side of things, who kind of runs their culture in a sense. It's also Eric Spoelstra, right, Pat Riley, all of those people kind of there just handling everything and have been there for forever. And I think that really is something that helps you build all of that constant. For the San Antonio Spurs, it's Greg Popovich, right? He's been there for forever, and you do things his way. And you kind of can see what that is and how they kind of make their team. The Thunder have a good culture too, known for player development, bringing up guys, working hard. They're always kind of a scrappy underdog that, at times is going for it, even when they're going through like a 2-year rebuild. They have Sam Presti, who's been running the team since day one there, since they relocated, and even really before that. And that's a guy that kind of has a vision and is executing it, and people are following along with it. So you need that sort of constant, which is not necessarily something that the Pelicans have had. So you try and bring in guys that can I help you with things like discipline, accountability, work ethic, enjoying somebody else's success. I really like those as kind of the 4 pillars of this, right? They brought in JJ Redick to help with some of that. Well, he's a player. He gets traded, right? It's not as easy. You brought in CJ McCollum, who's kind of known as a leader, known as a good locker room guy, and someone that will help others. And I think he's spoken about this, right? He calls himself a servant leader. He's out there kind of stepping in when you need him to step in. He's not going to be the most vocal guy necessarily in the locker room, but he's going to try and do it by leading by example, being out there on the court, as evidenced by, how many games he played despite all of the injuries and, at least one surgery that he's going to need to have this year. That is a pretty incredible thing, and he deserves a lot of credit for all of that. He played 75 games. 75 games, averaged 21 points, by the way, and shot 39% from 3 on over 7 attempts per game. Almost 6 assists with basically like a messed up thumb on his shooting hand. Okay. You do that, right? Larry Nance Jr. trying to play through games, good locker room guy, with the injuries doing the best that he can. And then you have the other injuries on the team. Were guys taking this as seriously as they should have been? But you can see that it's not just importing a guy in and it fixes things, right? You go back to Zion Williamson and him kind of laughing, and Brandon Ingram too, at CJ McCollum and his stretching routine. And clearly that's doing something for CJ. But he wasn't able to kind of really impart that on those guys. Otherwise, maybe they would have been on the court a little bit more. So they need to find this in somebody, whether that's head coach Willie Green, whether it's an assistant coach, whether it's a player that's just going to be here for a while and kind of gets it and is the elder statesman of the group, but also has been in New Orleans. But you also do it when you've been successful, right? If you're a losing team, can you really have a culture? Maybe. I think so. If it's 1 year, 2 years, and then you're back to winning, the Thunder have been good for the most part. And get into the playoffs at times when you don't think they're going to, and really went for it this year, beat the Pelicans, right? So I definitely think you can have that when you've had success, but that is just not what the Pelicans have really had yet. And I think that's part of the problem from what we've seen with this franchise right now. Once you start winning, can you build that? Yeah, because there's more stability, but they're not there yet. And if you can't get that buy-in to an extent from Zion, it might be something that you're never going to be able to do. That discipline, right? That accountability. Is he taking accountability for not taking the rehab well and just thinks he can play? Does that cause a rift between the team? And what do you do then? That's what this team really needs to try and figure out, I think. And that's easier said than done. But look, they're developing guys well. The guys all like each other. They buy into head coach Willie Green. That's a really good start. I do think there is accountability there too, just not to the level that we probably really want it, where these guys come in and like, we are serious, professional, and all of that. Figuring that out is what's going to probably build a very strong culture here in New Orleans and help the Pelicans get to the next level and have more success than what we've seen so far. That's what we're hoping for. How does that influence Brandon Ingram, Zion Williamson? We'll talk about those the next couple days here on Locked On Pelicans. That's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans. Thank you all so much for listening. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. I'll be back with you all tomorrow.